The agenda this week celebrated a life of public service with Toronto's former tiny perfect mayor, considered the challenge of political correctness, and heard the case to commemorate two former female MPPs. We begin the agenda's week in review with planning for the arrival of autonomous vehicles. Take a look at the monitors in here, because some people are not yet thrilled with the notion of autonomous vehicles. Roll tape.
Oh, there's cars coming! Oh, there's cars! Bill, just put me back for me control it. Oh, dear, I could never.
Yes, there will be a bit of an adjustment as we try to figure out driving, letting somebody else do the driving. Anyway, let's follow up that with, here's the Toronto Star's Oliver Satgow, who wrote this. It's 7:20 a.m. on a Monday in the not-too-distant future. You wake up and you realize you've overslept. It's a 2-hour commute to work. So you call your boss and you tell her you'll start working on the way. A quick shower and what hardly qualifies as breakfast, and you're out the door. There's no car in your driveway. You realize you forgot to order one. A quick tap on your phone, and 2 minutes later, an empty car drives up. You get in and pull out your laptop. For the next 2 hours, you're immersed in work as your car takes you to the office. Once you arrive, you'll order another car to pick up your kids, who've hopefully woken up by now, and drive them to school. Another car will pick them up and drive them home in time to have dinner with you. This is a day in a very possible future in Toronto. The technology that will get us there, driverless cars, is already starting to change how we live. Philippe, you've come the furthest, so I want to ask you first.
All right.
How accurate is that future?
Well, I think it's certainly one of the many possible futures. If there's a 2-hour, I'll say one thing, if there's a 2-hour commute, that's probably, we haven't achieved the potential of automated vehicle driving. Because one thing that we can see is that with the arrival of these technologies, we can have a much more efficient use of the city space. Some of the work that we've done looking at how these systems could potentially roll out, this is one scenario, there are other scenarios as well, we could see a dramatic reduction in the number of vehicles used in the city and a dramatic reduction in the amount of travel in the city. Now that is a good scenario. I think the city of Toronto has worked on some of these types of scenarios as well, but there are also dystopian scenarios that are possible where people use cars very much like they own and use cars today, except without the driver. And these are the scenarios where you have the dog being driven to the vet, where you have the children, like we heard, being driven to school. I think that we have to keep in mind that as we see these technologies roll out on the ground, everything else will be changing at the same time. And so it's unrealistic to expect that we will just have a self-driving vehicle used much as we do today. This type of scenario, I think, is probably more likely. But there are even greater, more optimistic scenarios.
Which we'll get into over the course of our discussion. This field sure is very far in the future. So why do we need to be talking about it now?
Well, I think that we need to be getting ahead of this and planning and asking the questions of how do we make this technology help us, make our cities better, rather than simply letting this technology happen to us. And so moving forward from what Philippe was saying, another scenario for this type of technology is not that it provides the opportunity for people to live further and further away and drive more, but maybe it could be used to fill some of the gaps we have in our transportation system. So for example, we talk a lot about serving the last mile. What happens when
what does that refer to, the last mile?
When the sort of the transit station or the GO station, you can't really get to your home or to your office from there. Maybe there's a slow bus, but maybe you have to park at the GO station. So these types of technologies could fill up those transportation gaps and actually help boost ridership and take cars off the road.
Stephen, how much is the City of Toronto thinking about what AVs, autonomous vehicles, might do to the future?
So we started looking at this about 18 months ago, and Barry Kirk, who's sort of a known Canadian expert on this, came in to speak to many city divisions on the issue. And so we're preparing basically to look at, we don't know what the future is going to look like. So we engaged the University of Toronto to prepare a white paper for us. And in there, we sort of outlined two potential futures. And one is autonomous vehicles, similar to the current model, that are all privately owned by individuals. A second model that we see coming forward in companies like Google and Uber and those sorts of companies is transportation as a service or a shared mobility model. And you could think of them perhaps as robo-taxis. If we go one way or the other, it could have very different outcomes for cities. So that's the sort of piece that we want to really get our heads around. What we likely see, though, is that probably both of these models will move forward over the next decade or so.
More than 70 years ago, this province elected its first female members of the Ontario legislature. But to stroll around the grounds of Queen's Park, you'd be forgiven for not knowing who Agnes MacPhail and Ray Luckock were, because there's no significant marker of that milestone. Marie-France Lalonde, the Liberal MPP for Ottawa-Orléans, wants to change that, and she joins us now, along with Sylvia Beshevkin, Professor of Political Science at the University of Toronto and the author of Women, Power, Politics. Nice to have both of you here at TVO with us tonight. Marie-France, I want you to get us off to the races here, talking about Agnes MacPhail and Ray Luckock. There is almost nothing at Queen's Park that reminds us that they were there. So let's start with that. What do we need to know about these two women?
Well, we need to know that they were trailblazer of their time. They were our first two female under the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, the CCF, which is the ancestor of the NDP. And the motion came about, well, we were having a conversation with our Liberal caucus, the Women's Liberal caucus, and we saw that there was very few representation of the female contribution in politics at Queen's Park. So I'm here today, and thank you very much for that, Steve, and with Sylvia to discuss why this is so important for us to have them, to have a monument in their honor at Queen's Park.
To remember them. What was it about Agnes, besides the fact that they were the first two women ever elected? Tell us something about Agnes MacPhail that you think is memorable.
Well, I think she's primarily known for being the first MP. And then the first MPP in the legislature. She was also, she's known for her statue, or in a way of, her interpretation of equality for women and her fight for that, if I may say. So I like to think that she contributed immensely on where we are today as women in politics.
And she would have been part of a very small caucus at the time, too.
Very small. And she also is known to the first pay equity bill. So she brought this forward, I think, in 1951. So very interesting approach and woman. And I want to quote, and I'm sure Sylvia would know this quote very well, but one thing she kept saying is, I want for myself what I want for other women, absolute equality. And when you hear this in those days, it means a lot. Right? It means a lot. And Ray is a little bit less known. A lot of people, when we brought the motion, said, oh, I thought there was only one woman. And they were equally elected the same time in 1943. And Ray actually did so many great things for the women rights in terms of equality, the same. Also the right of the workers. It was during the war. And she spoke very loudly about that aspect where women would have the choice to continue working after the war. So she's known also for the million name signature. She brought in 1948, she brought million names, a petition to the then Premier Mackenzie King, and asking the goods and services in terms of costs to be legislated. So the cost wouldn't go up or down. So she was part of that movement. So
she took that to the federal government.
She took this. She took this. Yeah, and she physically, the way we read, is that she brought the actual million name signature petition to the actual prime minister.
Now, this is, Sylvia, help us out on the history here, because I learned that Agnes MacPhail was the first MPP ever elected in Ontario history, but she kind of shouldn't have been, right?
Well, she was elected in a pair, right? And we often remember, pairs by virtue of the one with the higher public prominence. So because Agnes MacPhail was our first woman MP, we tend to sort of associate her with pioneering and women in politics. But she was also, one of the first two at Queen's Park. It was decades after her first election in Parliament. But there's certainly many aspects of the careers of MacPhail and Luckock that resonate. For example, when MacPhail first won her nomination federally, she ran against something like 9 men and had to defeat them one after another in a highly contested nomination for the United Farmers of Ontario. She and Ray Luckock had their share of challenges at Queen's Park as well, being part of a CCF caucus in a period of a Red Scare, political environment. So they certainly faced many of the same challenges of public surveillance, but then much neglect in the wake of their careers that we could argue has been the fate of many women politicians subsequently.
Marie-France, I gather that back in the day, you were sworn in alphabetical order. So, I mean, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but, L comes before M.
Yes.
So why is it Agnes MacPhail is seen as our first MPP ever, female, and not Ray Luckhawk?
So from the knowledge that we could capture, she was asked by her party to leave the space for Mrs. MacPhail to be the first MPP. And I would probably say, because of the MP status that she already had received, the party felt that, she should be the first MPP also. And when I started looking at the documentation that was presented to me, I found this so humbling in a sense of this woman allowing her colleague, and I'm sure there was a little bit of competition at time. This was a time where the first two, and if you look at a little bit of Mrs. Luckhawk, she was, a fighter herself, right? And she allowed Ms. MacPhail to go first in the row and be elected as the first MPP. And that's also the reason why I think this motion is important, is to educate Ontarians about the fact that, we had the great privilege of having elected two MPP in 1943.
It's hard to imagine that there's ever been a greater champion for the cities of this province, and in particular its capital city, than David Crombie. It's also hard to imagine that Toronto's former tiny perfect mayor just turned 80. And at an age when many former politicians have long ago disengaged from the issues of the day, the city's 56th mayor is still the go-to guy on so many pressing issues. To take stock of a life in public service, we welcome David Crombie back to TVO. So great to see you again.
Thank you very much, Steve. Good to be here.
Do you feel 80?
No, I don't, honest. I mean, I still get up in the morning when I look at the mirror, I say, gee, if with a good night's sleep, I could get rid of this. No, I don't.
Well, we're going to do a bit
I'm
of
a lucky man.
Yeah, we're going to do a bit of Ralph Edwards here, okay?
Oh, okay.
Kind of this is your life.
Okay.
Because for a guy who's 80, you are still ridiculously involved in the public life of this province. We should tell people here, you live across the road.
I do.
You live across the road, and it's taken us ages to set up this interview. You actually turned 80 on April 24th.
I did.
It's taken us this long to get you in here because you are always doing stuff. What is on your plate right now that you find particularly fascinating?
Well, I chaired a panel for the province of Ontario on the planning for the future land use planning of the future of the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And that took about 8 months with a really excellent panel. We put out some recommendations in November, and I'm expecting over the next 2 weeks or so, very early in May, we'll get the government's response. And I've already been meeting with agricultural groups, environmental groups, land development people, because they're all going to be affected by the recommendations we made. That's really interesting. Secondly, I chair the Toronto Lands Corporation. We get the surplus lands from the school board. And we try and either lease them or sell them, but what we try and do is create community hubs out of them, and that's taken me back into the neighborhoods in Toronto, which I really enjoy. And I do chair the Nuclear Waste Management Advisory Council, and I've done that for about a decade. So there are other things. I'm involved with my museum, which is a really exciting digital, the shortest way to describe it, a digital museum of the history of Toronto. It's people, places, ideas, and things. And that's now just a couple of years old, but we're moving very nicely. A new generation will understand history a little differently than my generation and previous generations.
That's all?
A little bit, here and there.
Okay, we're going to go back here because I want to take you back 44 years ago. Wow. 44 years ago,
right,
when you won your first of 3 terms as the mayor of Toronto. Did you expect to win that election?
No. I didn't really. I'd spent a term, in those days it was 3-year terms, and I spent a term as a councillor. I'd spent the previous 5 years in dealing some community work and helping organize a sort of a local group called Civic Action League. So I'd had a good number of 8 years or so in that way. Now, when I ran, it was within my own mind, if I won, that was great, but if I didn't win, then I was happy with the loss, as I used to say to myself, and believed it. But when we slowly began to win, then of course it was quite surprising to us. The last couple of weeks we knew we were doing pretty good.
Once you took the mayoralty, what did you see as your mission in that job?
Well, it is interesting because we'd spent the previous 5 years, as I mentioned, previous 6 years involved in local matters. So we already had in our heads, not all the same, but there was a group of at least a slim majority on council who had very similar ideas about how the city should move forward. Quite frankly, what motivated us was the U.S. In the U.S., fine old American cities were falling before our very eyes. They were even burning, Detroit, and so on. They were hollowing out the core, so that because the American model of the city in those days was that you lived in the suburbs, worked downtown, and you built expressways to get one to the other. That we saw is just have no respect for the downtown and its possibilities. So we wanted to change the American model, and we didn't. There was nothing we could use. There were good American writers, Jane Jacobs and a bunch of others, but we had no other. There were no other practices that helped us. So we had to suck up on our own understanding of our own roots and who we thought we were, and that turned out to be that because we were deprived of any alternatives that we could see. That really turned out to be really good because it allowed us to be. It instilled in us a respect for who we thought we could be.
Well, your vision for city building won. You won the day.
Yes, they did. And
still, to this day.
To this day, the downtown core. Bear in mind, the plan did not have a lot of people living, or hardly any people living south of Queen. That kind of stuff. So the idea of building a downtown, we built the downtown plan. We also, of course, saw again today same kind of problem. The need for affordable housing. So we took on the housing issue very strongly, and we built we built a lot of housing, affordable housing, co-op housing, affordable housing in those days. So those were the issues. Downtown, also neighborhoods. We discovered ourselves the fundamental importance. It seems corny, but it's not, of neighborhoods. Neighborhoods. Are where new personalities are born and raised.
I'm not sure there's a more controversial sort of indigenous political correctness issue in North America today. Michael, I'm going to go to you on this one.
Sure.
Than the issue concerning a particular football team that plays in the capital city of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of British parliamentarians right now who are also involved in this. You want to tell the story?
Yeah, sure, certainly. I've actually written about it a couple times when I was a columnist still for the Washington Times. And basically, 2 U.S. presidents, both Democrats as it happens, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, have tried to go after the Washington Redskins nickname per se, which they claim is derogatory, that it doesn't have any positive connotations, etc.
It's their name, right? The Washington Redskins.
Yeah, we call it a nickname. It's a name. You're right. That's the team name, but it's seen as the nickname.
The end result is defined in the dictionary as a slur. So, it's drawn attention for a good reason, but I'll let you finish.
Well, all right. The reality there is that there are a lot of Native American groups and others who have actually spoken out vocally about it. Now, naturally, the owner of the Washington Redskins, Daniel Snyder, has spoken out against it. But I think the real issue here...
He's keeping the team name the way it is.
He's keeping the team name the way it is, and I don't think he really is that concerned about the arguments that are going on. But here's the big thing, as they keep pushing it back into the Trademarks and Patent Office over and over again. It's the intervention of these 2 U.S. presidents for a private team in a game of football. What does this really have to do with their duties? I mean, they're certainly allowed to express their opinions. If they don't like the name, if they do like the name, it doesn't really matter one way or the other. I think it really has to be left up to the team to make that decision, to the league to make that decision, and their fans. Many of the fans, and they are of all different sorts of diverse groups and nations, seem to be very content with the name. The name has always been seen in a very positive fashion. I know Redskin as a name hasn't, but the team has been very successful on the gridiron, and they're sort of seen as quote-unquote football warriors.
But the British angle here, I gather, is that a couple of British parliamentarians, the NFL goes and plays, I guess, one game in London every year.
One game here, exactly.
And these parliamentarians don't want the Washington football team to come to Wembley Stadium and play if that's going to be their nickname.
Well, that's the way they look at it, and that's perfectly fine. I just don't think this has very much to do with their daily duties, quite frankly. As private citizens, they can hold whatever position they want, Steve. That's perfectly fine. But to try and control what a team decides to do with its own name is preposterous to me.
Ryan, should the Washington football team change its nickname?
Well, let's talk about the British parliamentarians that are railing against this. Ironically, now they care about the thoughts and feelings of Native people after hundreds of years of colonialism and land theft and the creation of these countries. But let's go to the core of the issue. You know, should they change the name? The numbers of people that are calling for the name change have grown exponentially in just a couple of years. And of course, you will find, you know, some sports fans that are saying, I'm fine with the name. You'll find Native people that are fine with the name. But if you go back to Dan Snyder's own charity, who was there sort of giving gifts to different communities and trying to look as though they're doing right by Native communities, many of those communities that originally embraced the charity and worked with the Washington Redskins no longer do. They see the truth in the matter. And, you know, what I would like to frame this conversation as is a chance to really be a teachable moment in the United States and for the world, to look at Indigenous people are still here. They're a very valuable contributor to society in North America broadly, but more specifically in what we've survived through the past couple of hundred years. And I think that the Redskins, Dan Snyder, and the whole organization, this could be a fantastic opportunity framed in reconciliation, which is the buzzword of the day here in Canada.
Can I just ask, Ryan, can I ask just a little bit of a chippy follow-up here?
Sure.
Your podcast is called the Red Man Laughing Podcast. How come that's okay, but Snyder calling his team the Redskins is not okay?
Well, Redskins, as defined in the dictionary, is a slur. So that's the non-starter. The fact that I called it Red Man Laughing is, maybe I should have called it Pink Man, because as you can see, I'm not exactly your stereotypical-looking Native person. It's the title of my podcast. I have no problem identifying myself through these tropes, and what I'm doing is I'm reclaiming that. In particular, the red man was always to be feared, but what I'm talking about specifically in my podcast is our spirit and the intent that we walk with is to be a kind and gentle people, and the podcast, I'm a comedian, so Red Man Laughing is a suitable title.
Okay,
and
understood.
that's all been dealt with in the first 2 seasons of the podcast, which everyone's invited to listen to, of course.
Understood. Darren.
You know, I tend to sort of think I don't share their history, I don't understand the impression of the struggles they've been through, or what is a slur to that particular group. So I'm sort of willing to take their word for it if it's a slur, and it seems a little odd and a bit much, you know, for me to think that I should lecture them on what should offend them. I also don't believe.
That's the difference, though. There are many Native Americans who have actually spoken out in favor of it, seeing as a positive attribute.
You know, in terms of what it would do to the team, yes, maybe it affects the team's history and their tradition, but we have plenty of traditions which have come in and out of focus. And as for the team, this has happened to the Washington team before. The Washington Bullets basketball team is now called the Washington Wizards because they were concerned about gun violence. The only effect that had is people said this was political correctness, and then a few weeks later they forgot about it, and the team reaped an enormous financial windfall when they rebranded the team and sold all the new paraphernalia.
And that is the Agendas Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety at tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, or on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.